Ceann Comhairle. Taoiseach, the statement by Minister Shatter last evening left many people very disappointed and indeed left many more questions to be answered. He succeeded in dragging the Garda Commissioner into this debacle, claiming now that it was a casual aside that he learned of the information about Deputy Wallace, although earlier in the week he had said that it was an official briefing or that he was advised. He failed, however, to explain how such a minor incident involving a TD could find its way up to the Commissioner's desk, despite the fact that it wasn't even recorded in the Pulse system. And furthermore, why the Garda Commissioner felt it necessary to pass that information on to the Minister. But the crucial issue remains why the Minister decided to utilise that information in a political debate to undermine a political opponent. And his non-apology was an insult and actually missed the point. Deputy Wallace may be entitled to a personal apology, but the issue is much wider than that. It's about the abuse of information, private information about a citizen, that comes into the possession of a minister. Is that right or wrong? The apology should have been about the misuse of that information and the abuse of his position. It was a half-hearted apology, but crucially it missed the essential point, the essence of this issue and of this question. Now, the Garda Commissioner is entitled to brief the Minister on serious issues, but is also entitled to expect that the Minister will treat such information sensitively, properly and confidentially, and that he would not seek to politicise information given to him by a Garda Commissioner in a political debate to undermine a political opponent. And can the Garda Commissioner trust the Minister again with sensitive information about anybody or about any issue? Now, Taoiseach, Minister Sherlock, Minister Alan Kelly, Deputies Phelan and others have made it clear that they have concerns about how the Minister has handled this issue. You yourself said there were issues to be looked at.
Please, we're over time.
The fundamental question I want to put to you, Taoiseach, do you believe that the decision by the Minister, by Minister Shatter, to use information, private information on an individual, on a Dáil deputy, supplied to him by the Garda Commissioner, do you believe it's right for him to actually use that in the manner that he used it?
Thank you.
Is it right or is it wrong?
Thank you. Taoiseach.
Well, first of all, Minister Shatter has already dealt with this, and he came into the House yesterday and he made a very full statement on the issue, and he apologised, and he said he was sorry for what happened. I think it's important that we get a little perspective into this. I think we need to look at what has actually happened here. There were a series of allegations which were made about serious criminality and corruption in the Garda Síochána in the administration of the penalty point system. Those allegations were taken up by a number of deputies who repeated them in public and in the House. There were individuals who were named in the House before the investigation was undertaken. There were wide-ranging and sweeping allegations which had not been able to be stood up. I think it was a bad episode that allegations were made about people which were not stood up. What happened was that the Minister launched an investigation which involved a considerable amount of Garda resources, which has shown that there is no evidence of criminality or corruption. But what it did find was disappointing failings in the way in which the penalty point system was worked, and as you now know, there are disciplinary proceedings that are being taken in a number of cases. That was the context in which the remarks were made. I think it's also. I think Minister Shatter addressed the issue of the context in which the Garda Commissioner made that information available to him. As you know, there were allegations made, as I recall, by at least one deputy, that public officials had intervened to have road traffic offences in some way disappeared by the Gardaí. And in his statement yesterday to the House, Minister Shatter said, I have no doubt that the Garda Commissioner was mindful too that Deputy Wallace might make public reference to the incident as part of the public controversy which was going on about fixed charge notices, and in these circumstances he had a duty to mention it to me. And he made that in the statement that he made to the House yesterday. I think the bottom line here, Deputy Martin, is that Minister Shatter has given a statement to the House. He has responded to questions about it. He has apologised, and he has said he was sorry.
Thank you.
He hasn't said he was sorry.
Martin.
He didn't say he was sorry for what he did. He said if Deputy Wallace believes I did him a personal wrong by mentioning it, I have no problem in saying I'm sorry. That's not an apology, honestly. He didn't say he's sorry for misusing private information on an individual to politically undermine him. That's the point. This is wider than Deputy Wallace. And you need to get that point. And you yourself, if you were on this side of the House, would be saying the exact same thing. Minister Shatter himself said the exact same thing in terms of the unsuitability of any minister in any government using such information to score political points and to undermine a political opponent. And he said it was unacceptable behaviour for any minister to do that in any government. Now, he steadfastly refused last evening to answer questions that were put to him in relation to that quotation that came from his very mouth. So he didn't apologise last evening, and he hasn't apologised. And he stood over the misuse of private information that was supplied to him by the Garda Commissioner. The Taoiseach has 100% supported him doing that. You are now 100% supporting him as well. You now think it's okay to use private information.
Thank you.
That a Garda Commissioner or Garda gives to the Minister for Justice. You're giving him carte blanche now, Taoiseach. That's essentially what you're saying in your reply, because I asked you a very simple question. Was what Minister Shatter did right or wrong?
Thank you.
You just about said it was.
Thank you.
You used that famous, the most popular phrase emanating from government ministers right now is context. The context was very clear, Taoiseach. Whether you agree with Deputy Wallace or Deputy Clare Daly or others, what has happened actually since this issue has been raised is not pretty. You described it as a bad episode. One deputy being handcuffed and ending up in a prison cell. I'm uncomfortable about that, irrespective of whether you're uncomfortable with the issues that were raised by the deputies. I'm uncomfortable about the fact that people who might be annoying ministers,
over time. Would you mind
who might be annoying ministers, are getting undermined and so on. Now, I don't know what the reasons of whatever, but I think it should be very clear here that no government minister should have done what Minister Shatter did.
Thank you.
And I think in your heart, Taoiseach, you know that, but you seem incapable of saying it here this morning.
Taoiseach.
Well, I think the first thing is that the Minister Shatter has already dealt with this. He has already come into the House. That is what happens when an issue like this arises. Is the Minister comes into the House, makes a statement, takes questions, and in this case, he apologised and said he was sorry. And frankly, I think that you should accept that. Now, there are issues, of course. Of course there are issues that arise. There are issues about, first of all, the Gardaí exercising common sense in relation to the handling of road traffic offences. And I think it is appropriate that they are enabled to continue to do that, and enabled to continue to do that also in the context of the fixed penalty charges. Secondly, and Minister Shatter made this very clear, there is no question whatever of Minister Shatter or the Garda Síochána keeping tabs on members of this House, or Minister Shatter or anybody in the government keeping tabs on political opponents. And thirdly, there is an issue in relation to privacy. And I think that is an issue, I think, frankly, that probably requires a longer and a wider discussion, and perhaps it is an issue that perhaps might well be addressed by an Oireachtas committee, because it is certainly my view that issues that the Garda Síochána are dealing with should not come out into the public domain unless there's an actual charge or whatever, either through media or through any other way. The bottom line here is that the Minister for Justice, gave a statement to the House on the issue. He said he was sorry, and in respect of how he came into possession of the information, he explained that in his statement, and he explained the rationale for it.
Deputy Adams. Deputy Adams, thank you.
Taoiseach, Apple CEO Tim Cook told the US Senate investigation yesterday that for the last 10 years, Apple Sales Ireland paid an average corporation tax rate of just 2%. In 2011, this company paid just 0.5% tax. Another company, Apple Operations International, also based here, had an income of $30 billion from 2009 to 2012, and amazingly, it paid no tax whatsoever. Now, Taoiseach, how is this possible? I can't imagine a local business getting away with this type of tax avoidance. One law for big corporations, developers, bankers, another for small businesses and ordinary citizens. So, Taoiseach, why was the standard 12.5% rate not applied to these companies? I mean, you know yourself that the hundreds of millions of lost revenue could have been used to get people back to work. Instead, as we know famously, ordinary people have to pay more taxes to make up the shortfall. You'll also know from your portfolio that this type of tax avoidance hurts the developing world, and Christian Aid estimate that the lives of 350,000 children could be saved. 350,000 children's lives could be saved each year if this kind of corporation tax avoidance was ended. So, Taoiseach, is the CEO of Apple right when he said that the average rate of tax paid by one of these companies was less than 2%? Can you confirm that the other Apple company has paid no tax since 2009? And could you tell us how many other companies are availing of these type of tax arrangements and how much revenue is lost to the economy?
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
Well, first of all, let's be very clear that the corporation tax regime that we have in this country is a regime that is established here in law. It's passed in our finance. Please do me the courtesy of listening to the answer. The corporation tax rate is established in law. It's 12.5%. There's no special tax rate deals that apply to any individual company. We don't have any special low corporation tax rate regimes or arrangements for any multinational companies. The tax rate is established in law, and it applies evenly to all companies. It's 12.5% here on the trading profits arising in Ireland, and it's 25% on non-trading income in this country. There is an issue which is arising because of the differences in the legal and tax systems between countries, and international tax planning does take advantage of these differences in national systems and rules. And Ireland has been working for some time to address those issues. We've been working at both OECD level and European Union level to examine those structures and to consider how international rules can be implemented to ensure fair levels of taxation. I chaired a meeting of the General Affairs Council of the European Union yesterday, where this was on the agenda in preparation for today's European Council meeting to address, and it's an issue that we have been advocating and putting forward in our capacity as presidency of the European Union, to address the issues of tax evasion, address the issues of tax fraud and of aggressive tax avoidance by companies operating internationally. and we are advancing a series of measures to deal with that. Minister Noonan, together with the EU Tax Commissioner, has circulated a letter setting out 7 proposals as to how this issue will be dealt with at a European Union level. In addition to that, the OECD has a project on base erosion and profit sharing which deals with those issues. Ireland is one of the strong supporters of that approach being taken by the OECD. In addition to that, in December of last year, Ireland became one of the first countries in the world to sign an agreement with the United States to improve international tax compliance and to implement the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. And this type of agreement is now being hailed as the emerging international standard for the automatic exchange of tax information. So this issue of the use, if you like, of the differences between the tax regimes in different states is something that is being addressed at an international level. It can only be addressed at an international level. We support that. We are one of the leaders in seeking to have those tax loopholes addressed both at European Union level and at OECD level. And in the meantime, we have our tax regime is established here in law. There is one law. We have one law in respect of corporation tax. There aren't different laws. There aren't different standards that apply to different companies. There aren't different arrangements that are made with different companies in respect of the tax rate. There is one law, and it applies evenly to all companies.
Thank you.
Well, there's clearly one law, but famously, it's one law for the rich and one law for everyone else. And the fact.
Please.
Yeah. The fact of the situation is, and the Minister may be able to count this up, implicit, and I would say explicit in your answer, is that this company has got off without paying, in one case, any tax whatsoever, with paying less than 2% tax, and in one phase paying 0.5% tax. Now, count that up, Minister, instead of the smart answers. Look at what you have done recently to reshape revenue. Revenue can now go into people's credit union accounts. It can now go into people's bank accounts. It can now go in and deduce money for all sorts of taxes from people's salaries. Now, you do say that the government is doing the things that you have outlined. Could you tell me, did any officials from the Department of Finance or did any officials from Revenue meet with any of these companies before they made their tax returns?
Thank you.
And could you also tell me, because you said there is an issue, well, it's more than an issue, it's a very profound matter, that at the time when we're strapped, at the time when ordinary people are carrying the burden of very, very bad policies, that these corporations are able to avoid paying tax. So can you tell me if finance or revenue officials met with any of these companies before they made their returns?
Thank you.
If I was to know that, I think you'd have an entirely and correctly a different question to answer me. In this country, in this country, Deputy Adams, the dealings of any individual taxpayer, whether that is an individual or a company, with the revenue commissioners, are not known to members of the government, nor indeed should they be. It is an entirely separate. But how would I?
Sorry, but without
that is an entirely separate system. We have a system. We have a system whereby we make the law in respect of tax, and the dealings in respect and the tax affairs of individuals, whether they're companies or individuals, are confidential. They are confidential with the revenue commissioners, as should they be. And whatever about a Minister for Justice knowing about a road traffic offence issue. If any minister was to know or was to come in here and comment on the affairs of any taxpayer, whether they're an individual or a company, there will quite rightly, there would be a different issue in relation to it.
Thank you.
Let's look at the overall.
Please.
Let's look at the overall situation, because the picture that you are painting, Deputy Adams, is a picture of, that there is somehow tax evasion or tax avoidance in respect of our. No, we're not.
Sorry, would you please allow an answer to the question
in relation,
without interruption?
He's just in the door.
In relation to the application of our tax regime, the reality is that companies in this country pay 9.1% of Ireland's total tax revenue. No, please listen to the answer.
Sorry, we're over time. If you want an answer
Companies
to a
in this
question,
country
I'll cut it off.
pay 9.1% of our total tax revenue. That compares with 5% in France and 4.2% in Germany.
Thank you. Deputy Daly, please.
Thanks, Ceann Comhairle. Taoiseach, I was going to start by sincerely recognising the role of yourself, indeed Minister Howlin, Minister Rabbitte and Dick Spring before you, when you were in opposition, in playing an important part in calling for and lobbying for independent oversight of An Garda Síochána, and on the basis of your record, appeal to you to intervene in relation to the present situation. But I have to say I was shocked by your response to Deputy Martin when you chose to repeat a false assertion that claims made on this side of the House did not stack up even under the Garda's own internal inquiry. Now, I named one individual in this House because it was a member of the judiciary who every day sits in judgment on ordinary drivers in relation to penalty point matters. The investigation found that that judge had verbally petitioned a Garda and got 3 penalty points written off. The report said that there was not an adequate paper trail on that basis, and it is a fact that any convictions taken on foot of a prosecution by that guard in front of that judge are now unsound. This is a very serious issue. It is also a very good thing that the practice of terminating fixed penalty points has ceased. That is a very welcome thing, one that you should be happy about. Now, we were told after the Morris Tribunal that there would be a new system, that the blue wall of silence was being broken down, that those who wanted to report malpractice would be protected by the new confidential recipient situation. I have to say, Taoiseach, that the present debacle really exposes that as being a sham. The House was treated last night to a cabaret from the Minister for Justice, tying himself up in knots, on the one hand emphasising the informality of the information he received, presumably to escape data protection legislation, on the other hand stressing the formality by relying on Garda Síochána legislation. The Minister has consistently created the illusion that he acted promptly, took the issues seriously and dealt with them.
Thank you.
Claims that he got the information in September in his department, he got them in October, have been backed up by his appointed commissioner. That would indeed be prompt, but there's a problem, Taoiseach, in that the Taoiseach says differently. The Taoiseach, not once, not twice, but 3 times in written form, has said that the information was passed on to the Minister's department well in advance of that. Now, I want to know, Taoiseach, can you give us answers on those? Which version of events is the correct one? And what month did the Minister, apart from the dossier, first get information of the Garda whistleblowers' allegations? And could you tell me in that context and in light of those unanswered questions whether you have confidence in the Garda Commissioner, the confidential recipient, the Taoiseach and the Minister for Justice?
Taoiseach.
Yes, I do have confidence in the Garda Commissioner, and I do have confidence in the Gardaí, and I believe that every member of this House should express that confidence as well. The issue in relation to the allegations which were made were investigated. The Minister for Justice established an investigation. The report of that investigation has been presented, it's been published, it's been referred to the Oireachtas Committee on Justice. Any question of detail arising from that report can be pursued there. Any witnesses can be invited in to participate in that discussion. The Garda Commissioner can be invited to attend that committee, can answer whatever questions you or any other deputy wants to put to it, and that's the appropriate way it should be dealt with. That's what public accountability is about. You asked also about the issue of whistleblowers and the protection of whistleblowers. This government is the first to take seriously the issue of protection of whistleblowers. It's arising from a commitment that we have given in the programme for government. The drafting of the Protected Disclosures Bill is now at an advanced stage, and the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform expects to bring the bill to government shortly for approval and to publish it and to introduce it before the Oireachtas. The main aim of that legislation is to encourage and to support workers who raise concerns regarding possible serious wrongdoing when that comes to attention in their workplace. It will achieve this by providing strong protections for workers that are penalised or victimised by employers for making a protected disclosure. Whistleblowing protections will be available to workers in all sectors of the economy, including members of the Garda Síochána and the Defence Forces. A number of specific disclosure channels or gateways will be provided for workers in the legislation: to an employer, a responsible minister, a regulator, or in particular specified circumstances externally, including potentially into the public domain. Important restrictions to external disclosures are to be put in place in the public interest to govern external disclosures relating to law enforcement or security, intelligence and defence matters. A stepped disclosure regime will be put in place under the bill, with lower thresholds to make an internal disclosures, with the aim of promoting disclosure to an employer in the first instance in order to have the disclosure investigated and any failings that are revealed fully rectified. Now, I think it's been high time that legislation is introduced to protect whistleblowers, to ensure that where an employee discovers that something wrong is happening, that they can report that without fear of their job, without fear of any discrimination being used against them. This is an issue that has been outstanding for a very long time. This government has committed to legislating to protect whistleblowers and to bring in legislation of this kind. We are doing that. The legislation is due to be considered by government very shortly. I have set out the main provisions of it in my reply, and I expect that legislation will be before the House very shortly.
Thank you. Deputy Daly.
Tánaiste, that this issue isn't going to go away. I think there were 5 reports in relation to the Morris Tribunal and Morris inquiries before actually anything was ever done. You say that the report was published and any details that we have can be dealt with in committee stage, but that didn't stop you furnishing and repeating false assertions about the report earlier on. I noticed that you say you've confidence in the Garda Commissioner and the Gardaí. Well, the reality is a lot of Gardaí don't have confidence in the Garda Commissioner, and I certainly don't. But I do have confidence and think that the ordinary members of An Garda Síochána deserve better and deserve to be supported. I think you were very wise to not answer my question as to whether you have confidence in the Minister for Justice and the Taoiseach. A wise move. I did. Maybe you weren't listening, and maybe you can answer it this time. Because we have strong evidence to contradict the Minister's position and any endorsement of him and his actions you might regret. There have been serious discrepancies between contentions made by the Minister for Justice and indeed the Garda Commissioner and evidence we have seen in relation to this matter. There is serious evidence that whistleblowers were ignored, were warned off and were attempted to be silenced. So I think your endorsement of the confidential recipient might have been a bit hasty also.
Well, first of all, in case there's any doubt, let me assure you that I do have confidence in the Minister for Justice. And since you mentioned the Taoiseach in the course of your question, in case you have any doubt about that either, let me say that I have confidence in the Taoiseach. There's no issue about confidence. There's no issue There's no issue in relation to that. In relation, I think it's important that we, first of all, there were serious allegations that were made about the penalty point system. Those allegations were investigated, there's a report, and there's now a process by which that report can be dealt with and people can be questioned in relation to it. That is the appropriate way of dealing with it. There's a set of recommendations which arose from that report which are being implemented, and there are some disciplinary procedures that are being pursued. So this is an issue which was brought to light, was addressed by the Minister for Justice, an investigation take place on it, report and action to follow up on it. There are issues which I think are of legitimate public concern, both about how do the Gardaí operate. I mean, most people, as I've said here before, most people's contact with the Gardaí or with the law is in relation to road traffic offences. And I think there are legitimate issues of public concern that the application of the law in respect of road traffic offences is applied evenly and applied fairly, and is also applied in some instances with a degree of common sense. The idea, for example, that a penalty point is attached to somebody, and that the only way that that can be addressed, no matter how wrong the application of that penalty point might be, that the only way it can be addressed is by the individual going to court. I don't think any fair-minded person believes that that's the appropriate way to do. That the Gardaí ought to have a degree of discretion and be able to exercise their common sense in these matters. I think what people want to know and want to be assured of, and what we should all, I believe, contribute to, is that the law is being applied fairly to everybody. That there isn't some kind of inside track, or that there isn't some kind of way who are people who are favoured or who are in certain positions, public positions or celebrity positions or whatever, can have their situation dealt with more favourably than anybody else. One law applied evenly to everybody, and I think we should all ensure that what we do and what we say contributes to that. And I think at this time, important to re-emphasise again our support and our confidence in the Garda Commissioner and the Garda Síochána.
Thank you. That completes